Now, if you think Kristi Noem was bad, this guy, Markwayne Mullin, who is the new Secretary of Homeland Security, he has this new ridiculous idea to curb illegal immigration. Let me show you.
It didn't take long for former Oklahoma Senator Markwayne Mullin to go from the nation's #1 security officer to political agitator on behalf of the president. I'll explain. A report from the U.S. edition of the London Times says that Mullin will, quote, withdraw customs officers from the airports of Democrat-run sanctuary cities that protect undocumented migrants. All right, the cities in question here include New York, L.A., San Francisco, Chicago, Philly, Denver, Boston, New Orleans. And what this could mean is no international travel in or out of those cities. And to be clear, this is a completely empty threat. Here's why. Doing so would decimate the aviation industry and further harm the American economy, adding on to what the war in Iran is already doing to it. Not to mention enrage families who have international travel plans this summer. This will literally never happen, and the threat itself isn't likely going to foster cooperation. Also, there are very few major cities that are truly red in America. Many are purple, and the biggest are blue, and that will never change. The United States is very much a place of city mouse versus country mouse. Now, if we're looking for signs about how Mullin would lead the department, this is a sign.
Okay, I know it's just going to be an empty threat because it would be a logistical nightmare for the entire country and the rest of the world by having no international flights to, say, LA or New York or San Francisco. But if we want to inflict pain to the United States because of what they're doing to the rest of the world, I would actually love for them to implement this. Because what this would mean is that anybody that's still traveling to the United States would have to travel into a red state. And chances are most people are flying into, like, say, Seattle or LA or San Francisco or New York. All of the ones that they want to ban. It would make it harder for current Canadians and even international tourists that are still going there to find flights. But not only that, it would decimate their tourism industry even more. So to Markwayne Mullin, fucking do it. I dare you. I double dog dare you. I mean, let's just think about this for a minute. Let's say, for example, you're living in Toronto and you want to go to Los Angeles. There's a direct flight right now, I believe. And, even though the flights have been reduced, I still think there's at least a few of them that are going direct. But if they ban the sanctuary cities like LA, anyone traveling from Toronto to LA would have to make a stopover somewhere. I mean, look at this chart that I created. This is just a small sample from Air Canada, from Toronto. So if you're going from Toronto and you want to go to LA, you might have to stop over in Dallas or Florida, then go to LA. Okay, this chart actually makes it a little bit easier. If you want to go to the United States, these are the only cities that you can fly into. So if you're in Toronto and you want to go to LA, pick one of these for your stopover. This whole idea would just make it so much harder for people to travel to the United States. And I'm all for it, to be honest. I mean, go for it. If you want to shoot yourself in the foot, by all means, be my guest. But like what the guy said in the video, it's probably not going to happen. But it does show how this new Secretary of Homeland Security, and I for one actually hope this one goes through. So if it does, I'm going to get my popcorn ready. Because we're going to see the current tourist numbers to the United States go down even more. And I haven't even talked about international arrivals into the United States. So go ahead, Markwayne. I dare you to do it. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. And if this is the first time you're here, and you want to hear more from a Canadian and international perspective, hit that subscribe button so you're notified of my future videos. And if you hear a cat, it's mine, it's not yours. Now that wasn't really the intro I wanted to do, but I couldn't help myself but actually want to talk about that one first. But in this video, I do want to talk about how Mexico is benefiting, because our next door neighbor has decided to do a whole ton of crystal meth in one night. And by doing that, Canadians still want to travel, especially our snowbirds. And who has actually benefited is Mexico. So let's get started on these articles, and I do want to thank Abby for sending these over to me. I'll read this out to everyone right now because I know some of the viewers are just listening. For decades, Canada's snowbirds had a simple plan every winter: pack the bags, head to Florida or Arizona, and wait out the cold. But something shifted in early 2025, yeah, some orange dude, and the change has been anything but subtle. Triggered by trade tensions, tariffs, battles, and pointed in political rhetoric from Washington, hundreds of thousands of Canadians have quietly begun redirecting their winter dollars elsewhere. Oh, hey, there's an advertisement for Vancouver. I guess my algorithm's telling me to come home for a little bit. The big winner in all of this has been Mexico. While the shift is still playing out, the numbers are already dramatic enough to put both governments and tourism boards on notice. What sparked the boycott in the first place? The 2025 boycott began in Canada, targeting both American and consumer products and travel to the US, in the context of the US trade war with Canada, and President Orange Guy repeated references to Canada potentially becoming the 51st state. The sentiment was swift and widespread, By February 2025, 90% of Canadians said they were closely following the trade war issue. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, representing the highest level of new engagement since the start of COVID-19 pandemic. That level of public attention translated quickly into real changes in behavior, particularly among older Canadians who had long-standing habits of wintering in the US. Now that 90% of Canadians part, I would love for that to be true, but I don't think it is. I mean, maybe 90% of people heard about it, but the most important part is who's taking action on it. Because I'm sure everybody watching this video right now, whether you're in Canada or Europe or anywhere else, I'm sure you must have colleagues that are aware of what's going on and they don't favor it very well, but they'll still be happy to plan a trip to Florida or wherever else. And then you got those that really just don't give a shit and they're going to go anyways. So while I do like that 90%, I think it's a little bit lower than that. The scale of the drop in Canadian travel to the US. Statistics Canada confirmed that January 2026, 30% fewer Canadians crossed into the United States by vehicle than in the same month in 2025, marking the 10th consecutive month of year-over-year declines, while air travel was down 24%. The aviation data tells a similar story. OAG aviation data confirmed 450,000 fewer Canada to US seats in the first quarter of 2026 alone, representing a 10% capacity reduction, with WestJet cutting US capacity by 19%. These are not marginal dips, they reflect the structural pullback that the US industry is now scrambling to address. Now, one thing I do want to mention is that these numbers that we're seeing right now, yes, it's showing the overall decline. But one thing that we learned is that the decline is starting to get steeper. I guess the best analogy I can give is like if you're on a ski hill and you're on a green run, and you're going along and all of a sudden the green run is starting to turn into a blue run. Because not too long ago, I just reported that at the BC Peace Arch and Truck Crossing, if we compare the numbers from March 2024, the rate is down 55%. BC broke the 50% barrier. And I know for the state of Maine, they're down 17% just this year. So I don't know what the total is for them if we compare it to March 2024, but I'm sure it's pretty high. Either way, this is good for the boycott, not very good for the United States. Moving on, the real pain felt on the ground in Florida. The decline in Canadian visitors is not just a statistic for Florida's hospitality sector. It's costing real jobs and forcing real closures. At the Atlantic Hotel and Spa in Fort Lauderdale, Canadian visits were down 32% as of the midpoint of 2025, with the owner openly saying that the hotel had desperately seen a decline and was begging and hoping Canadians would come back. Aw, thoughts and prayers. But sorry, I don't think the Canadians are going to come back. Along Florida's Gulf Coast, the pain runs even deeper. Restaurants on Marco Island were closed for 1 or 2 days a week because they could not afford payroll to stay open full time, with hoteliers saying they could not justify hiring new workers due to the drop in Canadian group business. You know, one thing I do love doing is reminding people what was said in the beginning of the boycott. These are comments that I've saved, and I love using them on my videos, because it contradicts what these actual business owners are saying. But not only that, it also talks about our friendship. What I see on the screen right now is not friendship, and it's not somewhere where I'm going to spend my money anymore. So to that hotel owner who's begging Canadians to come back, thoughts and prayers. Canadian snowbirds are selling properties. The departure of Canadian snowbirds from Florida goes well beyond canceled booking vacations. A Royal LePage survey found that 54% of Canadians who own property in the US were planning to sell within the next year, with 62 citing the current administration's act as their primary reason. Real estate agents across Florida are seeing something they have never witnessed before. Once Quebec-based broker Axios told that she was working about 35 Canadian sellers, more than 3 times the usual for that time of the year, and had no Canadian buyers at all. None. Man, that makes me happy to read out. So it's clear the snowbirds selling their property is making a dent, and we just have to make sure we listen to the right people. The real estate agents who have no buyers from Canada, the hotel who is actually begging Canadians to come back, and the restaurants that have to close 2 days a week because they don't have enough business. Listen to these people, not the haters that I showed earlier in my comments. And especially don't listen to those people from the Snowbird Advisor or Snowbird Associates that say all of their members are still going. Your members have incentives to go, which you are giving them, but they also don't reflect the entire snowbird industry. Now moving on to the Mexico part of this article. Mexico stepped in and filled the gap. While Florida was counting empty hotel rooms, Mexico was upgrading its welcome mat. Between January and October 2025, Mexico welcomed 2,079,000 Canadian visitors, accounting for nearly 13% of its total international arrivals by air, marking an 11.4% increase over 2024 and a remarkable 18.1% surge from pre-pandemic levels. Holy shit. That is truly awesome to hear, to be honest. Mexico's Secretary of Tourism, Josefina Rodriguez Zamora, publicly welcomed the trend, saying that the figures confirm that Mexico is a reliable destination for millions of global travelers. The influx of Canadian visitors translated directly into foreign exchange earnings and broader economic activity across resorts such as Quintana Roo and Jalisco. As you can tell, I don't really go to Mexico very much, so I'm not really too aware of these two locations. But do you remember that time when the people in Florida, and even like the governor and whoever else, was saying that the Canadians will have to come back to Florida because they got nowhere else to go? Well, that definitely aged badly, because right here, Mexico is taking advantage of it. An 11.4% increase since 2024 is not a small number. Of course, we would like to have it bigger. But how many people in that 11.4%, or even the 18.1% before pre-pandemic levels, would have went to the United States? I'm going to guess quite a bit of them. The next section. Canadians are choosing longer, more committed stays in Mexico. One detail that amplifies Mexico's financial gain is the type of visitor Canada tends to send. Canadian visitors represent the second largest group of international arrivals in Mexico, and they typically book longer stays than Americans, averaging 10 to 12 nights compared to 5 to 7, and show strong loyalty to all-inclusive resorts in Cancun and Puerto Vallarta. Longer stays means more spending per visitor on food, tours, transportation, and local services. This makes Canadian tourists particularly valuable to host communities, and it explains why resort operators in Mexico are actively marketing to them. Marketing from Mexico, I have no problems with. Marketing from the United States, they can go screw off. But talking about the longer stays part, I think this is where the United States really took for granted on how much we actually spend in their country. Canadians and international tourists, we get a lot of vacation days, or there's a lot of people that are already retired. For the United States to make that up, it's going to be very tough to do when vacation days are not mandatory, and, there's a global struggle because of their stupid president. But the average 10 to 12 nights, you have to wonder how much Florida and the rest of the United States are actually missing those nights. Now, the last section of this article, what this means for the long-term geography of North American tourism. What is unfolding right now is bigger than one winter season's worth of travel data. It represents a fundamental restructuring of how Canadians think about where they're spending their retirement years, their vacation dollars, and their seasonal housing investments. If Canadian carriers continue to expand Latin American routes and Mexican resort communities continue to market aggressively to Canadian retirees, this redistribution could become a permanent feature of North American travel rather than a temporary protest. Now, I know in the GTL community, it's going to be a permanent thing for a lot of us. And the GTL community is not just in Canada, we're global now. But the news about Mexico benefiting, I'm very happy about that. And I'm very happy that Canadians are spending money in their country. Part of me does wish the United States will learn their lesson in the future. Like they'll actually realize and appreciate the friendship that we gave them, how much we spent in their economy, and just overall what Canada did for the United States. But unfortunately, I don't have much faith in that. Which is why, again, I'm happy to see Mexico benefiting. And if there's going to be more victim stories coming out of the United States, I don't think I told you so is going to be enough anymore. To close off this video, I would like to thank Prof. Chris for sending this photo of Stanley Park in Vancouver. If you're not aware, Chris and I had an interview, when was it? Probably late last year sometime. And he's a Canadian currently living in Hong Kong. And just so happens to be from Vancouver as well. So we definitely have a lot in common, and he's actually become a really good friend of the channel, and also to me personally. I'm not afraid to admit it, but when I did announce that I was moving overseas for work, it was a rough time for me, mainly because of the haters. But talking to Chris and him being overseas as well made things a lot better for me. So thanks, Chris, for sending this over, and also for all your pep talks. Alright, that's all I got for this video, and unfortunately the co-host, she's been very quiet today. But I'll leave you with this video from a few months ago when we were talking about the co-host in the Discord server. So I hope everybody enjoys it. If you found any value or agree with anything I said in this video, or you want to hear more from a Canadian and international perspective without the US media bias, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button below. That way you're notified of my future videos. And if you want to see more of my videos, check out the ones that are going to show up on your screen shortly. Thanks everyone. I'll catch you in the next one.